Today on Slough School.
Hey there, I'm still Claire. I still work for the Columbia Slough Watershed Council. I'm out in a different location a little bit today. Sorry it's unsteady, my hand's a little bit unsteady. I am here at Whitaker Ponds Nature Park doing some stuff outside. As you might notice, the ripples on the pond. We're dealing with a little bit of liquid sunshine today. But this should be a good day to catch some macroinvertebrates. This is our first stop. We're gonna be checking macroinvertebrates here, and then we'll be comparing them to the ones we find at the stream in another part of the slough. So let's get to it. So I'm gonna go really quickly over all the equipment we're gonna use here. So we have this white bucket. We're gonna collect our macroinvertebrates in it. We have our spoons. We have a turkey baster that we're gonna use to suck up the macroinvertebrates and move them into our ice cube tray so we can look at them better. We have two different identification sheets. We have this one here with some insects that we know, like damselflies and water boatmen. And we have another set right here. The technique we're gonna use with our D-net is we're gonna do a dip and flip technique. So you're gonna dip it, you're gonna take it full of macroinvertebrates and flip it and clean it off in the water. So again, you dip, you grab, you flip into the water. I put water in this white bucket just a second ago. So I'm gonna do some dips and flips. You're not gonna be able to see me well, but we're gonna try it this way. So I'm gonna just skim the top of the surface for macroinvertebrates. I'm gonna flip it over in here. I'm gonna rinse it out. There's certain times of the year that it's better to do this sort of stuff because there tends to be more macroinvertebrates in the spring and in the fall. But notice how I'm always keeping one hand on the dock as I'm doing this. And one of the things that can be super easy to grab in here is fish. And our fish macroinvertebrates though. So fish are not macroinvertebrates because they do have a spine. And so any fish that we collect, we kind of just throw them back in the water. I'm gonna just keep doing this a couple more times. Oh, I got something big. Oh, just a piece of algae. Oh! I caught a damselfly in here. I'm gonna show you that in a second. That's awesome. I'm trying to look and see if I have any other macroinvertebrates. I have a little water boatman in there. Let's see if I can collect some more in here for us to look at. We have some vegetation in here, or some plant life. So I'm going to clean that off. I'm going to try going a little further out to see if I can collect some better samples. Oh yep, we still have our damselfly. Awesome. So sometimes in science, you'll do that for a certain amount of times when you're collecting. Here we usually do it for about 5 minutes and then we check what's in our bucket. So now that I've collected a fair bit of macroinvertebrates, there's some really big ones in here that I'm really excited to show you. I'm going to pull out some of the vegetation because that's what they're hiding on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some water in this ice cube tray. I'm going to lightly rinse these out a little bit so we can have some better visuals. That's one really important thing of science is making sure to keep and maintain your equipment, making sure it's all nice and clean for each time that you use it. Okay, so I've cleaned this out. I'm gonna grab some fresh water in here. So there's just a little bit of water on all these ice cube trays. And then I'll show you what we do next. Here we are. I'm gonna separate out some of these macroinvertebrates. I'm gonna take my little turkey baster. Actually, that one I feel like it's better to just scoop you. So sometimes, depending on what you're doing, you need different tools. So like I'm trying to get this water boatman that's right here. So I'm gonna use this scoop. I'm gonna slowly drain out some water. You can't really see what I'm doing. I'm sorry about that. You wanna stay in there. But I'm gonna put you in there. I don't know what you are. Sometimes you get some macroinvertebrates that you don't know what they are, and that's okay. We're gonna identify them in a hot second. We're gonna go through and look at those sheets and see if we can figure out what type they are. Oh, there's some snails. That makes me very happy. As I'm doing this, I'm separating them out by how similar they look. So if it looks like I have duplicates, I'm gonna put them in the same one together, depending on their size. So I've separated out some of the macroinvertebrates. Others haven't been separated out because they're just too big to fit in the ice cube tray, and because we're gonna release all of them back into the water, I really didn't want to do that to them. So let's look at what we have so far. We're gonna be looking at a bunch of the stuff here and determining their functional feeding group in a little bit. And this is for our pond, remember, because we're at Whitaker Ponds Nature Park. So let's look, and I'll just verbally say what we've collected out loud. So we have 1 damselfly, 2, 3. So we have 3 damselflies. We have 2 water boatmen, which you might remember are predators. We have 3 scuds, which aren't insects, they're just macroinvertebrates, but that's okay. We have 2 left-handed snails. These left-handed snails are also just macroinvertebrates. We have a baby fish that I accidentally caught, which I'm going to release him back into nature. We have an aquatic worm in here, which is just a macroinvertebrate. Over here we have another scud, and scuds are just macroinvertebrates, they're not insects. But those are all of the creatures we have collected. So we have 3 damselflies, we have 3 scuds, 2 water boatmen, 2 snails, an aquatic worm, and technically a fish, but we're not going to count the fish. So I'm going to release these back into nature and whence they came. Awesome! So we looked at our macroinvertebrates, and I'm going to release them back into nature. So one of the things we want to make sure we do is I take my ice cube tray and I just flip it over really quickly so all the macroinvertebrates are back in. I check to make sure that there's none still stuck in there. 2 of the snails are stuck in here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lean over, I'm gonna put some water in the ice cube tray, and I'm just gonna shake it gently, just like that, so we can get these snails out. I also am gonna take my finger lightly and just help them move along. All of our other macroinvertebrates are back here in this bucket. So I'm just gonna, using one hand, holding the rail, I'm gonna just dump these back into the water. I don't see any macroinvertebrates along in my bucket, but I'm gonna reach over and I'm just sort of gonna rinse it off a little bit. You kind of see me going like this. And that's just to get any of the macroinvertebrates who might be in there off and back into the pond. Hey, so we're at our next location here along the Columbia Slough. Instead of a pond, we're here at a part of the slough. And over there you can see some very happy birds, maybe? Yeah. So we're gonna be doing macroinvertebrates here in a stream versus a pond and comparing. There's a little bit different of a method. I'm gonna get a little bit wet because I forgot to bring boots, but that's okay. That's the joy of science. But at least it's not liquid sunshine anymore, so it's relative. So I'm gonna put you down and show you how we do it. One of the things you see me doing is I'm filling up my bucket with water, and then I'm determining which way the slough is running. I found the downstream, and so I'm putting my foot slightly above my net in the water. I'm kicking that substrate, pushing those macroinvertebrates into the net, and then cleaning out my net. I did this 3 different times, as you can see in the video. I just want to show you a little bit of a before. This is what it looks like before I go out and separate it all. So we can see some big macros like that in there. and a couple of others. But I'm gonna separate out this bucket a little bit and see what we see. So what you're seeing here is me separating out the macroinvertebrates that we found in the stream into the ice cube tray. I just wanted to do it really quickly, so this is why we've done it this way. I found an additional 2 sow bugs and a bunch of aquatic worms that are in here that are just too many to count. I counted 25 and there were still more that were moving, so that kind of makes it a little bit hard. Over here we have a water scorpion. We have some aquatic worms. You see them wriggling about in the center of the screen. There's another aquatic sow bug, though there are 3 of those. We have 2 water boatmen chilling. We have a large scud. Like, let me see if I can get it to focus a little bit better. Look at that scud. Look at how its little legs are moving. It's working real hard trying to get out. And then up here, I'm trying to figure out what I put up there. Oh, there's another baby aquatic worm in there. So I'm going to say 25 aquatic worms, 1 scud, another little thing that's moving in there. Is that a piece of grass or is that an animal? I think that's just a piece of algae. 2 water boatmen, 3 sow bugs, and a bunch of aquatic worms. So I'm back in the office and we're here to talk about the results that we got with our different sampling sites. So if you remember earlier in the video, we went to a pond and we went to a part of the slough. And so I have P and S here to represent those. Make sure to write this in for us. There we go. I'm going to include some macroinvertebrates, some images of the macroinvertebrates we caught. So we found aquatic sow bugs, aquatic worms, damselflies, which you can see here, left-handed snails that you can see here, scuds, water boatmen, and a water scorpion. So in the pond, we found 0 sow bugs, found 1 worm, 3 damselflies, 2 left-handed snails, 3 scuds, 2 water boatmen, and 0 water scorpions. In the slough, we found 3 sow bugs, 25 plus aquatic worms, 0 damselflies, 0 left-handed snails, 1 scud, 2 water boatmen, and 1 water scorpion. So I realize I misspoke here, which is why you're getting the voiceover. In science, we correct our mistakes, so here I am doing that. It's totally normal and totally human. So functional feeding groups are a better way to look at macroinvertebrates overall and how they're doing. So a functional feeding group, again, is how macroinvertebrates are grouped together based on what they eat and how they eat it. So we're going to talk about the functional feeding groups that we'll find in the pond and the stream, and we'll talk about later, just as a brief reminder of what they are. So there's a bunch of different types. Out of the 5, we'll be talking about 3 today. You can see me gesturing to the screen. Well, it doesn't really apply anymore, but we'll talk about that more later. So collector and gatherers, they collect small pieces of dead things, plant pieces, and other small pieces of food. They're one of our key functional feeding groups here. We also have grazers and scrapers. They scrape off algae from rocks. Also very important. And our last one we have are predators. They are macroinvertebrates that eat other macroinvertebrates. Okay, as some of y'all can tell, I'm not in the office anymore. Like I mentioned in my last voiceover, I saw a mistake in editing, so I decided to fix it at home before the video was out. So I'm going to go through, and we have all of our ones in the pond, and we have all of ours in the stream, our macroinvertebrates. So I'm going to break them down into their functional feeding groups, which is our table over here, FFG. We have our collector-gatherers, grazer, scrapers, and predators for the pond and the slough specifically. So with this, I'm going to go through and check off each of the macroinvertebrates when I put them into this category. So first we're going to start with grazers and scrapers. There are 2 grazers and scrapers on this list. Our grazers and scrapers are our scuds and our snails. So I'm going to check them off. And so we have one in the pond. We have left-handed snails in the pond. So I'm going to count that as 1 because it's one of this type of macroinvertebrate. And then we have scuds. So there's 2 for the pond and 1 for the slough. And again, these are scraper and grazers. So we have 2 for the pond. One for the slough. For our collector-gatherers, we have our aquatic sow bugs and our aquatic worms. That's something I actually found out recently. So I'm going to check these off. And we have no sow bugs in the pond, but we have them in the slough. We have aquatic worms in the pond, and we have them in the slough. So we have 1 collector-gatherer for the pond, and we have 2 for the slough. Lastly, we have our predators. So anything that hasn't been checked off are predators. Sometimes in different parts of their life, they tend to be more of one functional feeding group than the other. But based on what I've researched, damselflies, water boatmen, and water scorpions are all predators. I'm going to check that off. So we have damselflies and water boatmen in the pond. So that's 2 out of 3. And we have water scorpions and water boatmen in the slough, but no damselfly. So that is also 2. The reason why we do this is that macroinvertebrates, these numbers show that there's a lot more in the stream of like certain types, and then there's more diversity in the pond. But if you look at their functional feeding group over here, it says they're kind of similar actually. So that's why I like to use functional feeding groups when I'm doing macroinvertebrate surveys. I just think it's also pretty cool to see what things eat and how they eat them. Thank you so much for checking out this video, and I'll see you next time on Slough School.